So now like how we are going to do the testing. So like in order to do the testing, so we will follow the testing methodology. So there are two types of testing methodology which is available in the market. So one we call it as an waterfall model and other we call it as an agile model. Okay. So I will relate. So like what is meant by waterfall model and what is meant by agile model with the above example. Okay. So let's take this 2 BHK as an example. Like you are having some idea and you have provided your idea to the civil engineer, and then like they have done the design activity, and after doing the design, so they are verifying with us and we are telling that okay, so we are okay with the design, and post that like they are starting the construction. And when we are going to do the final check in the sense, so after doing the entire construction, so after doing the entire construction you are doing the final check. But while doing the final check, so like something is strike in your mind. So like you thought like let me change the elevation structure, or let me increase or decrease the size of the room. So if it tells some modification, okay, so like will we able to implement that modification? So for sure like it is going to be difficult. And even like if we try to implement the modification, so we should break the existing construction, and then like we need to modify according our need. But when we try to modify according as per our need, if there's some dimensional mismatch happen, so then it will leads to multiple rework. So like to construct a house, to construct a single house, so we are doing n number of rework. So why we are doing n number of rework? Because like you are not satisfied with the final check. So you are telling like I have asked for this design, but you have done in this way, so please change the design. So when we ask please change the design, so they are going to break the particular part and they are going to redo the design. So while breaking the part, let's say they are damaging the window. So if they damage the window, then what they need to do? So they need to replace with a new window. So which means here what happened? So like the time is increased, as well as like the cost is increased. So the effort is increased, as well as like we are not satisfied with the final product. Okay. So the same principle, so we are going to follow in the waterfall model. So like how we are doing the final check after completing the entire construction activity. So here we are going to begin the testing. So only after completing the entire application. So let's say like the developer is developing the application A to Z. Okay, they are completing the entire application, and post completing the entire application, so we will be like doing the testing activity. And while doing the testing activity, so if you find something, so you're just telling to the developers, so something is not working, and the developer try to fix that particular issue. So while he tried to fix that particular issue, it leads to some other new issue. And while the developer try to fix the new issue, like it is leading to multiple other issue. So which means what happened? So they will need to do a multiple rework. Okay. And also right, so whenever we are working on the waterfall model, so here the requirement will be fixed. Okay, so the requirement will be fixed because like we are finalizing the requirement. So how we finalize the design? Okay, so once the design is finalized, so they are going to do the construction activity as per the design. Okay, so we were unable to modify the design. So that is a disadvantage in a waterfall model. So like here the requirement is going to be fixed, and based upon the requirement they will complete the entire development activity. So generally So this waterfall model is an traditional approach. So which has been followed earlier, but nowadays like nowhere they are following the waterfall model. So the reason is like when we work on the waterfall model, so we do everything phase by phase. So phase by phase in the sense, after completing the design phase, we are doing the construction phase. And after completing the construction phase, we are doing the final check phase. And during the final check, if we find some deviation, then it is going to create a lot of rework. And even if we have any new idea, so we can't inject the new idea in the existing construction. And if we try to integrate the new idea, so then what happen? So it will leads to collapse of the building. And how we can avoid this process in the sense with the help of the agile model. Okay, so when we take a waterfall model, so here the requirement is fixed, and also like the one phase will start after completion of the other phase. So which is nothing but only after completing the entire development activity, so we are doing the testing activity. But in case of the agile model, so here the development and testing activity will occurs parallel. Okay, so both the development and testing activity will occurs parallel. So let's say, so let me take this house construction as an example. So like let's say, so initially, so like they are doing the basement work. Okay, so after doing the basement work, so you are doing the testing, like you are just verifying so everything is good or not. So if you're okay with the basement, so then they will proceed, they will rising the building. So while rising the building, so like some new design strikes in your mind, so you like think like I need to change the elevation. So but if you need to change the elevation, then we can inform to the civil engineers, and they can modify the design, and they can implement the elevation part, because they haven't started the elevation yet, right? So just they are at the basement level, and they are going to rise the building, and elevation is the last part. And while rising the building, so like if you are planning to add a new windows, or if you are planning to add any open window, so you can inject your knowledge, so like you can modify your design. Okay, so even when we modify the design, it is possible to implement the design, because like we haven't done the entire construction activity. So which means, so whenever we are using the agile model, so the change in requirement is possible. Okay, so we won't have the fixed requirement. So but whereas in the waterfall model, we always have the fixed requirement, and we will focusing on the fixed requirement, we will be completing the entire development activities, and post that like we will be doing the testing activity. But here when we use the agile model, so the change in requirement is possible, which means like you can modify the design at any phases, because here we are not dealing with the phase by phase. So we are doing the all phases kind of in a integration way. So which is nothing but we are doing the development and testing activity parallelly. So which means like after constructing layer by layer, we can verify everything, and if we need any modification, so we can do the modification, and finally right, so we will be getting the desired output. Okay, so which is nothing but we are doing the development and testing activity parallelly. Okay, so how we do here, like in case of an house construction, in similar way, developing the entire application, like we are going to split the application, we are going to break the application into multiple parts, and we are going to develop part by part. So let's say like we are developing the part one. So after completing the part one, the developer may develop the part two. So on during the time, what we can do, we can test the part one, and when they move to the part three, so we can test this part two, as well as like we can test the part one and part two together. So while the development activities continue, when we do the development activities, test like has changing the requirement. So let's say like some new technologies introduced. Let's say like they are going to introduce some new feature, which means instead of an existing feature, they are going to modify the requirement. And even if they modify the requirement, so the developer can inject the modify requirement, because like they haven't developed this yet, right? Because like we are doing everything part by part, and and we are verifying everything part by part. And even if we change something, if we add anything newly, so we can able to adapt that change. So that is the advantage of an agile. So the change in requirement is possible, because like we are doing everything part by part. So which means like whenever the developer develops something along with them, so we are doing the testing activities as well at the end. So when the developer complete the development activities, along with them, like we are completing the testing activities as well. Okay, so at the end, like we will be having the good product, the quality product, which is nothing but the quality application. And also like if any new technology is introduced, so we may have adapted the new technologies as well, because the change in requirement is possible. Okay, so in a real time, so we always work in a agile model. So the reason why we are working in an agile model in the sense, because the change in requirement is possible in the agile model. But whereas in waterfall model, so the requirement is fixed, and we are going to do everything phase by phase. So whereas in agile model, we can change the requirement in any phase. The business analyst can change the requirement in any phase, because like we are doing the development and testing activity parallelly. Or else like if you need an one more example, so let's take like we are planning to manufacture a car. So like in order to manufacture a car, so we may have more than, so 1 lakh components. So 1 lakh components in the sense like we may have the door, visor, windscreen, or multiple bolt and nut. And we are manufacturing all the components. And at the end, we are trying to do the assembly. But when we try to do the assembly, so the bolt and nut is not fitting with each other, or else like the door is not fitting. So then what we need to do? So we need to remanufacture that particular door. We need to remanufacture that particular bolt and nut. So whenever the remanufacture is involved, so the cost is involved. So which means like it is creating the loss to the client. And how we can avoid the loss to the client? So rather than verifying at the end, so after manufacturing each and every component, so we can do the testing activity. So once they manufacture the bolt and nut, we can verify so whether the bolt is fitting with the nut. So if we have verify each and every component, so then at the end when we try to assemble each other, so then we will be getting a final desired product. Okay, so that is the advantage of the agile model. So we are not going to check at the end. So rather than checking at the end, so we are going to check everything phase by phase. Okay, so which we call it as an agile model. So in the real time, so we always follow the agile model, and as part of our training, like we are going to discuss in detail so how the agile model work and how we are going to follow the agile process. Okay, and like just I have given the single shot answer. Like in a waterfall model, the requirement is fixed and it is kind of a traditional model, and everything depend upon the previous phase. So previous phase in the sense, only if the design phase is completed, the construction phase will begin, and only if the construction phase is completed, the testing phase will be begin. But whereas in agile model, so like we are going to do everything parallelly. Okay, so even we can do the change in requirement. So the developer will develop the application, at the same time the tester will test the application, which means here everything occurs parallelly. And this agile model is always transparent in nature. So I will explain like what is mean by transparent in nature in the tomorrow session.